Good evening everyone and welcome to Monday Night Live. You're watching Tanja from Tanja Kraus Horsemanship on our weekly Monday night show, which currently airs at 8 p.m. on our Facebook page, Tanja Kraus Horsemanship. Please let me know when you're here by clicking one of the icons or writing a comment or something like that. And then I know that I've got people ready to go. So I'm really excited about tonight's Monday Night Live. One, because of the topic, and I think it's one of those things that even experienced horse people can begin to forget. So what we're going to talk about are 10 ways that we can be safer with our horses. And this is, like I said, one of the things that we can get complacent with, and no matter if we're beginners or advanced, it might be a couple of those things that we haven't thought of in a long time, or maybe we just haven't seen before or heard before, or what have you. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. As we start to, everyone starts to arrive, I just want to say a huge, big, excited announcement, which is that our Joni books have arrived. So you can see here I've only got a handful here because I couldn't fit all the boxes on my desk, but I'm really so excited because I have written this kids book and my beautiful friend Deborah Hatley has illustrated it. So it's just an amazing book featuring Joni the pony, TJ the dog, and George the horse, and it really has an important message for our kids of today, which is embrace your uniqueness and embrace what makes you you, and don't compare yourself to others. So really important message, and we're so excited that the hard copies are finally here. Those of you that got behind us and pre-ordered, we thank you so much for that, and we will be organising delivery and shipments and where you can get them and all that kind of stuff this week. So a big thank you and a big, big announcement there. So we're really excited. I saw a couple of people starting to say hello. So hey Gwenda, hello. Someone else I didn't catch the name. They're starting to roll on really quickly. Ruth, hello. Eliza, thank you for the congratulations. We are really excited about it. So tonight what we want to talk about is 10 everyday safety things that we may or may not remember, overlook, have thought of before. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, it's kind of a mixed bag, this 10. It's not 10 riding ones or 10 ground ones or 10 everyday ones or 10 of any particular subject. It's a subject that I am pretty passionate about because I get to meet a lot of people who unfortunately have been in accidents with their horses in one way or another, or they've been injured around horses in one way or another. So, I just sort of sat down and started thinking about things that can go wrong, and probably the most common things that I see people doing or have heard more so, because obviously if I see them doing it, then I'm going to sort of step in if I can, but it's probably more people telling me their experiences in regards to their accidents. So the number one thing is trust your gut. Okay, we were talking over the weekend at the clinic, and I had a couple of people there that are in groups, so maybe local riding clubs or local clubs or things like that. And I'm not here to say that clubs are bad. In fact, I think they're really great, and I think it's a really nice community and things like that, until things like this start happening, which is you get to the club, you express that you're a little bit nervous, or you share with someone that you're worried about riding your horse or something like that, and all of a sudden you've got 15 experts telling you to get on your horse, telling you to suck it up, rolling their eyes at you, pushing you forward. It's really common, and in the adult world we don't really refer to it as this, but it's bullying. And you don't have to bypass your gut instinct, which is in there for a reason. Human beings, especially in our modern cultures, and especially in modern countries such as developed countries such as the ones that we're all living in, because we're all sitting probably somewhere pretty comfortable and watching me either on a phone or a computer. So I'm going to say that we're all probably watching from a fairly developed nation. We don't use our instincts very much because we don't have to watch out for lions. We don't have to, you know, be aware that elephants might trample through the village or anything like that. So, you know, our instincts, we tend to shut them down quite a lot, but we still have them in there. And that is, you know, the butterflies in your stomach. That's the little tingling through your body. Your instincts are what keep you safe. And it is perfectly okay for you to say to people, you know what, I don't feel comfortable getting on my horse. You can go on the trail ride without me, or I'm going to forfeit my dressage test, or whatever the circumstances may be. You need to trust your gut, and you either need to, I'm not saying trust your gut and put the horse on the float and take him home, and I'm not saying trust your gut and put him back in the stable, but what I'm saying is if your gut's telling you I'm not ready to get on the horse, then I'm saying do some work that'll help you be ready. So I personally have a series of exercises that I do with any horse that I'm getting on the ground first, and those exercises help me determine whether I'm ready to get on the horse and whether I've done everything I can to get the horse ready for me to get on. And it gives me the opportunity to read the horse, and it gives the horse the opportunity to tell me if he's ready to ride. You know, if you throw the horse out on the lunge and he's sort of racing around, or he's, you know, he might not even be kicking up. You know, some people say, oh, I put him on the lunge and he didn't buck and he was fine. Well, that's not always the answer. You know, if he's got his head up and his eyes wide and things like that, these are the indicators that are telling you that your horse isn't feeling comfortable with where you are or with the saddle or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not there. I can't tell you. But what it is a little tingly bell, a little like, excuse me, maybe this horse isn't ready for you to get on. So number one tip, trust your gut. So I'm having a comment here from someone whose name has disappeared. I'm very sorry about that. Just had a serious spinal injury and I'm still recovering. I didn't trust my gut. I haven't been able to get back on. Confidence completely shattered. So I'm so sorry to hear that. You know, it is easy in hindsight to look back and go, man, I knew that was coming. And I think I referred to this in one of my previous videos where I said, you know, I've spoken to so many breakers or colt starters or trainers or whatever you want to call them who have been perhaps suffered an injury, and I say, what happened? And they go, you know what? I knew the horse wasn't ready, and I went and I did it anyway. So, we can tell, and sometimes there's that little voice in the back of our head that goes, it'll be right, or, the sun's going down. I just want to get this ride in before the sun goes down, etc., etc. So rule number one, trust your gut. Rule number two, complete and total opposite end of the sail, complete segue, and they're all going to be all over the place like this. They're not in any particular order of importance or anything like that. It was just what what came to mind. So buckles and clips on rugs, and even clips on halters, although they're not as susceptible to it, I suppose. But making sure that your rugs, especially your clips on your back leg straps, are facing in, because I've heard of horses, if the clips are facing out like this, I've heard of horses rubbing on the fence or rubbing on something, the fence pushes into the clip, and now your horse is attached to the fence. Okay, so making sure that your clips are all facing inward on the horse and not facing outward, especially if you've got an itchy horse that's likely to back up to something that clip could hook onto. And making sure that leg straps and chest buckles and anything that you've got on your horse is I don't want it to be tight. I'm not saying put it tight, but it shouldn't be flapping in the wind either, because any of these things can get caught in something. Even belly straps, I actually cut belly straps off my rugs, especially for my horses that are turned out in big paddocks, because those I've seen a horse get its legs stuck through the belly the belly belts, and it was a quiet horse, so thankfully it was fine. It just stood there and waited for the owner to come and help it, but it could be a very serious wreck for that horse if he panicked or something like that. So like I say, I personally cut my belly straps off. If they're in my close by, like if they're in work and stuff like that, I may keep the belly straps on, mainly only if the horse is clipped, which I very rarely do. I haven't clipped a horse in over 10 years, but I'm just giving the options out there. Make sure those belly straps are nice and snug. So if the horse does actually come up with his foot, it's not hanging down like a big loose like a big loose thing. That brings me to the rear cinch on your saddle. If you ride in a Western saddle, if you have your rear cinch nice and loose, again, I'm not telling you to jack it up and make it really tight, but if you've got that rear cinch really, really loose and the horse kicks up at it, especially young horses or horses that aren't experienced in wearing a Western saddle, if they kick up and get their legs stuck through it, you're going to have a serious situation on your hands. So make sure that that rear cinch is, I'm not telling you to really, really tighten it because that could cause its own set of issues, but I am saying to make sure that it's, that it's affixed in a way where the horse, it's not swinging in the wind. I see people riding around at shows and it's 10 inches off the belly of the horse. It's not doing anything when it's 10 inches off the belly of the horse, other than hanging there, and it's a potential hazard. So that was number 2 and number 3, buckles and your rear cinches. So number 4 is don't leave halters on your horses in the paddock. So I see a lot of people leaving halters on in the paddock to either hold hoods on. If you need a halter to hold your hood on, it's probably not fitting correctly. And if you're turning your horse out into a herd, you probably need to reconsider the hood thing anyway. I know all of my guys play and they will all pull the hoods over the heads of the others. And I know it's annoying. I've got paint horses too, or coloured horses too, and Cooper gets a big brown head and a black body because he's wearing a combo, but it's better that than him running around blind in the paddock. So don't leave halters on your horses in the paddock. They can get I have seen some absolutely horrific injuries and deaths from leaving halters on horses where they can get caught on something, and if as they struggle to get away, it can tighten and it can choke them to death. So don't leave halters on your horses in the paddock. If they're hard to catch, teach them how to be caught. Your halter's not helping you catch your horse anyway. It's helping you trap him as he comes close enough to you. Hillary's saying, Poncho told me he wasn't ready to ride today, but I went anyway. After about 30 minutes, he tried to buck me off twice. There you go. So I hope you're okay, Hillary, and it sounds like you probably are since you're watching, and you said tried to, so I'm gathering that he wasn't successful, so I hope that you're fine. But yeah, there's a perfect example that happened just today. The next thing that I want to talk about is teaching our horses a one rein stop. So the one rein stop is typically something that we talk about when we're riding, but a one rein stop is something that you can teach a leading horse as well. It's a little bit more difficult, but the one rein stop when we're leading does help us if the horse tries to, or gets a startle and tries to run away or something like that. If they've been taught a one rein stop on the ground, then they'll sort of hit the halter and they'll go ahead and turn around and face you instead of continuing to run away and either dragging you with them if you're not going to let go, or God forbid if you were caught. Or running into, traffic or something like that. So both under saddle and on the ground, I want to teach my horses a one rein stop. Number 6 is teaching my horse to be hobbled. So I know some people don't believe in hobbles, or some people think that hobbles are cruel. I disagree with that. I believe that you can use any piece of equipment as something that's cruel. Hobbles were never meant to be cruel. Hobbles were always meant for horses that were out, mustering cattle on millions of acres, and there was no fences to tie your horses, to keep your horses in overnight when you were moving the mob from, across for 3 months on the road or whatever. Hobbles were used to hobble the horses so they could still eat grass. They didn't have to be tied to the night latch all night, or to the night tie all night. Hobbles were so the horses could eat and graze overnight, but they wouldn't get very far from the camp because obviously their legs are tied together. The reason I'm saying or suggesting that we should hobble or teach our horses to hobble as a safety thing is that when you teach a horse to hobble, he learns that if his leg is restricted at some point, not to struggle to stay still. Now, we have personally had horses that have been hobble trained get stuck in fences, and they may pull a couple of times, but after that couple of times, they will actually give back to the fence, and they will just stand there and wait for someone to come and get them, because they think, oh, all of a sudden I've been hobbled. I wonder why that is. They're used to responding in that way to that restriction. So a horse that hasn't been trained to hobble, we've probably all seen that. Horses, I think every single horse owner has had either knows someone or has personally had a horse that is that has been caught in a fence or has had a fence incident, let's call it. And it, a lot of the time it doesn't end up being a pretty thing, and often it is a very expensive thing. And often it means, that we can't ride or work with our horses or whatever for a long period of time while they're recovering from injury. So teaching our horses to hobble is a really effective and it's a really effective tool, and one that can pay dividends for their entire lives. It's a real safety thing. The next thing I want to, point number 7 that I'm going to talk about is just carrying your rope, your reins. What else? Probably that's about it. Your rope and your reins and things like that. I've seen a few people with lead ropes that will wrap the lead rope around their hand, or worse, wrap it around their arm. And even if they don't realize that that's what they're doing, they'll kind of have the lead here, and then they'll wrap it, even if it's just one loop, they'll sort of flick it over. If they've got a longer rope, they might just loop it around just to carry it so it's not dragging on the ground. And even the oldest of horses and the most quiet of horses can panic and can run or bolt. And if you're tied to them, I'm sure that we could all probably imagine what can happen. Or again, we might know people or have heard of situations where someone has been trapped in a lead rope, or even when you're doing up girths and things like that, don't wrap things around your arm because or your hand, or loop things around your fingers or anything like that, because you're just setting yourself up for an issue if the horse does happen to spook. And the last thing we want is to be tied to the horse. So always have a rein so it will come through your hand, and it will come undone. It's that looping that is the worry, because if the horse goes quick enough and runs, it'll actually knot onto your hand, and then you're stuck. And a horse that's panicking is more than equipped to drag you along the ground. So that's something that we don't want to experience. The next thing that I want to talk about is teaching our horses patience around gates and openings. So I have personally had a horse many years ago. I opened a gate and it was my fault. I opened a gate, he was in a stall, and I opened the gate inwards, and he was a little bit impatient, and the gap wasn't quite big enough, and he started to come through, and the gate got caught on his in his flank, and he ended up cast over the gate. And thankfully he jumped out of it, he jumped off the gate, but he was injured. He did have a graze up under his leg. And I've also seen it with a mare probably about 10 years ago that it was a rescue type mare, and she panicked and the same thing happened. She saw a bit of a gap in a gateway. It was only really small. She tried to get through it and she cast herself and got tangled in the gate. So it's very important to teach your horse patience when it comes to openings and things like that. And even float loading, like my horses all self-load, but they patiently wait. They won't kind of barge me out of the way to get on the float, because if I'm not ready for that to happen, or if I don't have the bum bar open wide enough, they could get trapped in the bum bar or any of those kind of things. So always teach your horses patience, and teach your horses to be able to walk forward and back through a gate. So if they do start to walk forward and you see that something is going to go wrong, that if you ask them to back, that they won't barge over you or barge through your queue, that they'll sort of go, oh, I'm supposed to be going backwards for some reason. Teach your horse patience around openings, gates, anything like that. I never ever want to, it's probably in my top 3 of undesirable behavior in horses that I see on a very, very frequent basis. I see people open gates and the horse is dragging them through the gate, whether it's a stable gate, whether it's a stall gate, whether it's a paddock gate, whether it's any type of gate whatsoever. The horse anticipates that he's about to go through it, and off he goes. And it's just such a dangerous situation. They can trample you in the gate. If they happen to get startled and they're already pushy around gates, they are just going to go over the top of you and things like that. Also, always check to make sure how the gate operates and how the gate opens. I cannot, if I had $1 for every time I had seen an inward opening gate in a stall only be opened just wide enough for the horse to come through, and then the owner turn their back and start walking, expecting the horse not to touch the sides, it's fine if they touch the solid side, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But if they catch that gate and just the right angle, their hip kind of points out and they touch that gate and pull it closed, it is absolutely disastrous. The other thing about them touching the solid side, depending on the gateway, they can have those little hooks coming out, and I have seen massive wounds requiring stitches on more than one occasion from a horse rushing through an open gate and catching themselves on the little peg that is for the gate clip to go on. So if you have those kind of gate clips, I would look at putting them not in the gateway opening, so making the chain longer and putting them around like the back of either, or changing the style of peg. So actually looking at the type of peg that's there to hold and thinking, well, if I ran into that or my horse ran into that, what kind of damage is it going to cause? Number 9, and I've talked about this before, but it came up again on the weekend when we had a couple of people with mounting kind of issues, and both mounting and dismounting. I'm a really big, passionate fan of using safety stirrups, and I don't necessarily mean the English ones with just the little bump on one side or the gap on one side. I prefer the stirrups that actually break away. So the Western stirrups that you can buy, or the ones for the fender saddles, they actually completely break away. So what happens is, if you were to get your foot caught in the stirrup and the horse was to have a jump, the stirrup breaks away and you actually end up with the stirrup around your boot still, and you're very free and safe, and the horse is sort of down the paddock with the rest of the stirrup. They are reusable. You can put them back together. For the fender ones, I know the English fraternity has similar ones that snap open and they drop away, so it's a complete gap. The little ones that have just the bend in them, that, you know, they've been around for decades, they're good because they do give your boot that bit of extra space. But if you've got quite a wide foot and you wedge your foot into that stirrup, there's a chance that you can still get caught in that. And even as your foot comes upwards like that, it can get trapped in those, like those English stirrups are so tiny. So a breakaway stirrup that actually opens all together. So even if your foot was like this, the bottom bar is gone, so your foot's going to come straight out of it. So I'm really, really passionate about using safety stirrups around horses. The next one, which I think is number 10, so you're going to end up with a couple of bonuses. The next one is not letting your horse rub with a halter on, which I know that sometimes if we've got them tied up, that can be hard to avoid, because you might tie them up to wash them or something and then you'll walk over somewhere. So I'm going to address that in a minute. But if you're there and you're holding your horse and he's got a bridle on or a halter on or anything like that, don't let him rub on stuff, okay? I have seen bridles, snaffle bits, halters, bitless bridle, you name it, any kind of headgear. I've seen horses, not every kind, but I've heard of every kind. I've seen horses rub on something like a little gateway or something like that. often on farms or stables or anything like that, there is little hooks, and if they come down on it just at the right angle, they're going to get stuck, and they are going to panic because the restriction is so close to their face. Normally, obviously, if you tie your horse up to something and he's got that bit of a loop, he's got that bit of space to sort of go, oh, okay, I'm tied up and come forward. Often horses won't do that as well, and that's a completely different video. But if he gets trapped here where he's not expecting it, he is going to panic. And if you're riding him at the time, that is a situation that you don't want to be involved in. So don't let your horse rub on anything while he's got any kind of headgear on, because there's a very good chance that he will get caught on something if there's something there to get caught on. It's just it's just too easy, because they're going to look for that poking outy bit to itch their face on. They're going to actually seek out something that's a little bit sharper to rub on. When you leave your horse tied up to something and you go to get the shampoo because you're about to wash him or something, he's tied to the side of the float, always make sure that there's nothing there for him to get caught on, and always make sure that he's tied short enough that he can't put his head down and get caught on something. I saw a horse at a course one time where the owner had tied it loose enough so it could get into the water, and it actually got its lead rope caught under the mud guard of the horse float. So it's not even an area that you'd think about. It's not even something that you'd sort of, I look along the side of my float and I make sure my tack box is nice and locked. I make sure that the fasteners that hold the tailgate closed, so the clamps that you clamp the tailgate, I always make sure they're closed and the horse can't sort of, reach them with the halter. I make sure that he's sort of tied right in the middle of the float, and I look along that whole area and make sure that there's not something sticking out. But I've seen horses tied to vehicles. I've seen horses tied to the front of the float where they can put their head down and get tangled around like the jockey wheel or the, where the ball is on the trailer or anything like that. Always look for little sticky outy objects, and don't tie your horse long when he's tied up anyway, because he's probably likely to put his foot over it or scratch. I've seen injuries from a back leg from a horse scratching and then putting down and the reine's been there, all that sort of stuff. If you want your horse to graze, take it for a walk. Don't leave it tied up long to the trailer so it can eat, or tie up a hay bag so he can pick at hay at a nice nice low height. Number 11 is an old saying, horse always kicks and the gun's always loaded. So I think that horse people can get really complacent sometimes, and I see a lot of complacency with just people just walking up behind horses and, it's Cooper, he's fine, he's never kicked before. Or, I have a lot of people that might come up to Cooper and sort of go, oh, can I pat him? Or especially little kids, he's got that beautiful face, he's really attractive, and little kids always want to come up and rub him. I've got no problem with them coming up and rubbing him, but I always make sure that I'm watching him and I'm watching the child at the same time. I don't get distracted and start talking to the parents or say, I'm just going to go to my car and get myself a drink of water while you're here patting my horse, because I don't know 100%. Cooper is amazing with kids. He's really sweet and all the rest of it, but you never know if there's not going to be a fly that he's going to stomp away, or, he might swing his head to get a fly on his side and knock the kid flying, and that can cause some really serious injuries to a little person, and even an adult, really. If a horse swings his head and you get hit by it, it's not really light. It can cause concussion and all that kind of stuff. So, the horse always kicks, the gun's always loaded. Always practice your normal safety things. Make sure your horse knows you're coming up behind him. Make sure you make him aware that you're there by talking to him or clicking or, anything like that, just to make sure that he has heard you and he's aware that you're there and he's not going to startle and kick out. The last thing that I want to talk about is learning your horse's body language. So the first thing that I spoke about was trust your gut. The second thing, the follow-up to this is learn your horse's body language. So educate yourself on your points, to recognize when your horse is not okay to ride, to recognize when your horse is a little bothered, to recognize when your horse is worried about something. And the more experience you have with recognizing those things in your horse, the safer you are going to be, because you're going to be able to walk out there. I think I said on a previous video, with someone, I can't remember what we were talking about, but I said I've owned Cooper for so long now, we're like an old married couple. I can pretty much walk into the paddock and take a look at him and figure out what kind of mood he's in. I'm not saying that I know him so well that I wouldn't do some ground exercises before I got on. And even with my advanced horse, yes, I'm going to do a leg yield. How do I know when I've done up the girth that there's not a bee underneath it? How do I know when I've put the saddle pad on that there's not a green ant underneath it that I didn't see when I brushed off the saddle pad? You never, ever know. There's no horse that I would have tied up, saddle up, unclip him and jump straight on. Not one. There's not a horse in the world that I would do that with. I would at least take, even if it's 4 or 5 steps forward, I'm going to take 4 or 5 steps forward before I get on that horse, just to make sure that there's not something pinching him in the saddle. There's not something that I've forgotten about. Maybe my girth is too loose or something like that. So learn your horse's body language is the next one, number 12. The one after that, so we're up to 13 now, so there's a few extra bonus points, but the one after that is have a pre-flight check. Have routines and systems, both with your riding and with your ground stuff, and don't compromise your vet, and don't compromise your farrier or your trimmer or whoever does your horses. Phil and I were only talking about it the other day because he trims my horses for me. And, we had one that was overdue and she really needed to be done. And we've got a paddock situation where there's 3 other horses in the paddock with her, and he was trimming her feet. And when he had finished, he said, I really want you to start bringing her up to the house to get her trimmed, because the other horses, you never know what's going to happen. The other horses are there. One of them could chase the other one and run into them, or etc., etc. It is a dangerous situation, and no matter how experienced I am, and no matter how experienced Phil is, and no matter how quiet Galliano is at getting her feet done, which she's only a young horse, so she's great, but she's not that quiet. You can't assume that she's that quiet. In all of her life, she's probably had, she's 6 years old. What are you doing? Maybe 10 trims a year, 11 trims a year. So that's 60 trims over the last 6 years. That's not a huge amount of trims. So relative to her age. No matter how quiet the horse is, no matter how experienced the people are, you can always make your situation a little safer. So, lock those other horses away when you're trimming feet, or when your vet's there, or when you're going to ride, lock the other horses away so they don't come and annoy you or run away. Or I was riding Cooper today and we rode past the mare's paddock, and they all decided to have a good old bolt up the road, and Cooper got pretty excited. He was, he's been locked up for a couple of days. We've been at a clinic, and he gave me a bit, and I was like, okay, we need to sort this out. But for a minute there, we were riding on our fairly busy road, and the girls were mucking up, and Cooper wanted to be in the paddock mucking up with them. So, and that's a 10-year-old horse. He's quiet. You guys have all seen him at clinics, and I've had multiple conversations with people about how quiet he is. No horse is quiet. Horses are trained. They're not quiet. They're not innately quiet by nature. Some are a little bit more sedate when it comes to their reactions. Some maybe have longer reaction times. Some maybe don't react to things that others have. Yes, there's a gradient, but no horse is quiet. Okay, if you've got a quiet horse, they're probably, maybe not expressive, or you haven't learnt to read their body language yet when they are worried about something. A horse that's worried isn't necessarily that horse that you picture in the paddock where it's got its head right up in the air and its eyes are wide and it's snorting and its tail's up in the air and it's running and all the rest of it. Maybe it's that one that's sort of standing in the paddock and it's got its head down and it's a little bit sort of looky, but it's got that tension in its body and you can tell that there's something wrong, but because you're so used to this expressive, explosive horse, you think, oh, look at Freddie, he's in the corner, he's so quiet. Freddie's not quiet, he just expresses his worry in a different way. So back to learning how to read your horse's body language, and have a pre-flight check, have routines when it comes to brushing, washing, feet trimming, all that sort of stuff. You know, it's always the horse that we say, oh, he'll be right, it'll be right. Whenever you hear yourself saying it'll be right, don't do that. Take a precaution. Say, what am I saying is going to be right, and what can I adjust in this situation to make sure that it is right, not that I'm leaving it to chance. It'll be right. Okay? What am I leaving to chance when those words come out of oh, he'll be right? What makes me think that he's not right? What is making me make that assumption instead of me saying to myself, I've gone through my checks, I've done everything I possibly can to make sure that he's safe, to make sure that I'm safe, to read his body language, to check in with my gut instinct, and to think, you know, I've done everything I can, he's ready, I'm ready, let's do this in a safe way. When I was talking about cinches earlier, it reminded me of something. So this is our final thing. So it's tip number 14. So we've got a couple of bonus tips there. I saw on the weekend someone that had done all the pre-flight checks and ground exercises with their horse, and then they had tightened the girth up and was leading the horse over to the mounting block. So make sure when you're doing your ground exercises that if you're going to tighten your girth, that you then go and do your ground exercises again, because if you tighten your girth and get straight on, you've just tightened the horse's belt, right? So if you haven't given him a chance to move and stretch the skin out from underneath that belt, then there's a chance that it's pinching him under there. You know, the old days we used to grab the horse's front legs and stretch them out. We don't do that anymore. We just walk them around. We don't do that anymore because you can actually stretch too much skin into the front and cause a pinch. Whereas the horse, as it naturally moves with the saddle on, isn't going to overextend the leg and isn't going to pull too much skin through. So it finds its comfortable place, so to speak. So don't tighten your don't make tightening something the last thing you do before you throw your leg over your horse or mount your horse. Make sure the last thing that you do is you know, your pre-flight check, your ground exercises, whatever you want to call it. You go, yep, he's ready, let's get on. So that was our mixed bag tonight of our 10 ways that we can be safer around our horses. And as I said, it was a bit of a mixed bag. There's some ground stuff there. There's some everyday handling stuff there. Please feel free to share your extras in the comments if you've got any suggestions or anything like that. Feel free to share anything that I might have missed, or any tips, or maybe experiences that have happened to you, like with the rugs, you know, the clips, the clips that are facing the wrong way, and little things like that we can get a little bit complacent with. Replays are always put up. I'm really excited that our YouTube channel is now going to be our home for all of these Monday Night Live replays. So what we're going to do, so this replay will be up on the Facebook page for about a week, and then it will get exported over to our YouTube channel. And just so the people, it probably won't even be a week, it might be a couple of days, and then they'll all be stored over on the YouTube channel, because then it makes them really easy to find. You can just search with the title, or you can search Tanja Kraus Horsemanship, and every single one will be there. We're in the middle of doing those conversions at the moment, but because we've done about, this is probably our 29th Monday Night Live, or 28th, something like that. So, you know, a huge thank you to you guys for making it so successful. available and joining me every Monday and giving me topics and interacting with me and all that sort of stuff. So it wouldn't be possible without you guys. I really thank you for that. So go and subscribe to Tanja Kraus Horsemanship on our YouTube channel, and that'll make sure that even if you go away or you miss a Monday night live, that you'll get notified when we upload it to the YouTube channel. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you got some good tips out of that, and I will have an information sheet available, so feel free to send a message with your email address if you would like the information sheet from tonight's Monday Night Live. I hope you all have a great week with your horses, and I look forward to hearing from you or seeing you all soon. Good night.